Hi and welcome. As you perhaps can tell, today we're talking about Sväva. It's the first release that I made with my solo project with my friend Johannes helping me doing the drums and the bass, and his help with recording it as well, for that matter, because as you can maybe tell from some of the other things I do, things tend to take some time when I try to do it myself. And it's not that I'm incapable or unable to do things, or don't have the time or energy, but I'm very, very self-conscious and nervous and critical about anything that I say or do. So you could to some extent consider this as a kind of self-management therapy pseudo thing. And I'm trying to erase that border between myself and the world, at least in some ways, to be better at not judging myself too hard when everything isn't perfect. That's why I added more members to make live recordings for Therapy for me instead of doing everything myself at home to start with, because when you add that live element, you are forced to face exactly what's in front of you, or rather, when you're finished with a rehearsal or recording, you have exactly what you captured, what's behind you. That's what you have, that's what you get. It's a very raw and natural way, which I really, really like. But for many years it was also the only way that I knew to do something. It's what came natural to me. And starting this project so many more years before I made a recording with it that was released almost a decade after starting the project, because I kept throwing away everything that I made and starting over and over and over. That's what I do with many ideas and concepts before they are shared to you. That's why it seems like I don't do a lot. But that's fine. I'm not trying to change your minds concerning that. But as I've said, I would really like to extend myself as much as possible and meet you somewhere closer to you than to me, and see what we can do together to really get more creative and interactive in these environments that are offered to us through both old and modern technology. So, Sväva, as a symbol, it features both peaks and passages, or valleys. It has the moon in its two coming and going stages, which there are better words for that I can't come up with the English word for right now. But it's a kind of ode to nightly wanderings in the countryside that has been very important for me, especially the past 8 years of moving away from the cities I used to live in to either be closer to friends or have a regular job. And when I moved to my previous apartment out in a small village with about 450 inhabitants or so, there was a small store for a while, but too few people supported it, so it closed. So I went from having maybe 300 meters to 10,000 meters to the closest store. And I wasn't a stranger to taking long walks before then, but that's when I really went into that. And that's also around the time when I started studying meditation on a very different level than I had before. And I made most of my activities in my life and in my day-to-day life were nightly life as a night owl. So the two songs are two different movements. They could just be one long song, but I have always composed songs with vinyl and cassettes in mind. There is always A, B, C or D as sides, as movements. That's how I hear and see music. And that will never change, even if I make a 68-minute long song. The actual composition of it is divided into two parts, two vinyls, but it's performed as one. And we recorded it in 2 takes of 30 or 38 minutes each, approximately. But that's another video. But this material was written in a very, very similar way. That I was out under the moon, and when you're alone on a road surrounded by nothing but empty fields, and the sky is clear and it's full of stars. It's full of magical moments. And it's hard, it's very hard to explain exactly how it feels. Because there is a certain sense of emptiness and melancholy and nostalgia, because that village is about 30 kilometers or about 25-30 minutes by a modern vehicle that's not by foot to travel. I think it took me about 2.5-3 hours on a bike. From where I grew up, which was in the outside of another city or village, but with a lot more people in it. But as I lived in the outside of that city, it had still that kind of village vibe, and I was closer to nature than anyone that I knew when I grew up. Anyone in school didn't have that kind of connection or need to be alone or in nature as I did. And it has remained a cornerstone of my existence. And I understand that some people may think that Sväva is too similar to hypothermia, and question why it was another project suddenly. Because to them, of course, they didn't know that I had the project for 7 or 8 years before then, trying to make something out of it, just waiting for the right moment and context and chance to express these thoughts and concepts and feelings, which has been more and more clear for each release that I've been making through this medium. And now it's really something more by itself than it was back then. But it takes time sometimes. It can take some releases before you really know and find out what that project's voice is. And that's why I have different projects. Even though the concepts and sounds can be very similar to someone else, to me, they are a similar story but in a different language. And of course, each concept is a different story, it's a different place. It's often commemorating different places, which I will go, of course, much deeper into in the next videos, because the coming releases after Sväva are more specific about that, while Sväva is more about that feeling, to levitate, to be outside of your body, or rather beyond it. And I'm fortunate that I'm not addicted to that feeling. But as you may know or have figured out, I have had some friends with that addiction, and it didn't really go well for either of them. And I could probably explain the sigil better. And to be honest, it's more of a symbol than a sigil, really. And the difference can be very subtle or non-existent in many cases. And it all depends on how you want to categorize and judge yourself to a higher standard or your works. Because I try to study and read as much as I can about different fields and degrees of shamanism and mysticism, occultism. What different cultures and scholars have been manifesting over the years throughout history, but I feel that I have no interest in creating a different path from what they're doing. That has never interested me. I'm not interested in certain fields of magic or occultism or any kind of religious cultish behavior. It doesn't interest me. But I am deeply interested and passionate about mysticism, and I have been to other realms. I know what is hidden from the view of others, and I see these realms without any additional tools or artificial keys. My gates are open, and with time I hope that I can invite some of you in. But this is a special place. It's not for everyone. It can be dangerous, because it will challenge you in ways that you perhaps wouldn't think. And that's the beauty of these journeys, of the meditations, and that's what I'm going to finish this video about. So as the first release, Sväva was made with the same kind of thought in mind as the whole concept of Consider Suicide is. From the very beginning is when you're not sure about what kind of background music you would like for reading or meditating or doing pretty much anything around your home or your friend's place or wherever you may be. I often felt disturbed by sounds around me, with the kind of irony behind this that I'm more or less addicted to experiencing something as close as possible to silence, and when I can't do that, I need something as close as possible to it. And from my perspective, that's something very calm and repetitive, sometimes minimalistic, can be faster, can be down tempo or up and down, anywhere between. But what it all share is that you can immerse yourself into it and really analyze it, or if you have a hard time dealing with what may be around you or in you for that sake or matter, it is made for you to put it on, and then you can decide if that's what you want to keep having on, or maybe you feel like listening to something else or watching something for that sake. But that part isn't really important. It's what you make of it. And I think there is probably some artists that create ambient music or different kinds of compositions that are made just as a background, not for something too immersive or detailed, even though it can be, depending on how you look at things or listen to things. But I didn't really know of any of these artists. I could probably find some of them if I research, but I'm not too interested in doing that. To me, it's more important to feel that connection myself as a form of meditation and ritual, to share with you these kind of songs that has helped me to relax and disconnect my mind from the surrounding world and whatever may be outside the window or your door or in your life. Just shut that door and open another. That's why I had to make this project. I'm sure and well aware that any of my other bands can be used for the same purpose, or any music or artist for that sake. That's all up to you, of course. But from my perspective, that's the true purpose of what I do with Considered Suicide and what Sväva is. It's compositions made for listening to something while being as close as possible to not really experiencing or doing anything, while at the same time experiencing something within you as much as possible. I understand if that goes against one another in theory, but it works in practice. And isn't that what matters? If you have any further questions about this release or the project, please let me know in the comments, and please subscribe and follow my other channels. They're all linked in the description below this video, and of course you can find this shirt or my other shirts and albums through my store, and just in general through me. Just let me know what you want or order from my shop, and you will generally have it within 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks worldwide. And I look forward to talking to you more again very soon. Take care. Skål.